Call to order. I will now call to order the Chesterfield Township Planning Commission meeting on January 7th, 2025. Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call. I will call the roll. Mr. Miller, here. Mr. LaBelle?
Here.
Mrs. Vosberg? Here. Mr. Leonard? Here. Mr. Renault? Here. Mr. Klanowski? Here. Mr. Jaworski? Here. Mr. Carr? Here. Mr. Brokart?
Here.
All are present. Approval of the minutes for prior meetings. I will make a motion to approve the minutes of December 3rd, 2024.
Support.
We have a motion by Mr. Miller, supported by Mr. LaBelle. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Approval of the agenda. I will make a motion to approve the agenda as submitted. Support. We have a motion by Mr. Miller, supported by Mrs. Vosberg. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Public comments, a 3-minute time limit on agenda or non-agenda items. If you want to speak, now's your time.
How's that, better? I represent Kurt Kloka, and I have a handout that I want to give you with reference to the adjacent parcel. My comments are as to the site plan approval, not the special land use, because my client has no objections to that proposed use. There's just some engineering and site plan issues that I've brought to the attention of the engineering water department here, and I want you people to receive these so that when you get to the site plan approval stage, in that you are aware of these items. And I sent them to Jonathan. He indicated that he got them, but he wasn't going to circulate it to the membership. But I think public people, adjacent property owners, can comment on the site plan. So I'll give them to Mr. Siebert, and he can hand them out.
Anybody else like to speak?
How you doing, Jeff Schondiger, Hagen? Real quick, I looked at the plot plan, and it's still shown as agricultural on your site. Is that, because it was supposed to be, you guys told us, or someone told us it was an M1, but it's still shown agricultural. So I was wondering why that has not changed, either on your site or has it not changed, and we've been told something different. That's all.
Anybody else like to speak? We'll move on to the next agenda item. Public hearings, there are none. Regular agenda, Mr. LaBelle.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Item A is Raising Cane's Restaurant, LLC Site Plan 2024-12. The applicant has withdrawn their request, and so therefore it's been removed from our agenda. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Presentation, reports, and discussions. Ms. Osborne.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome back. Just wanted to, we have 3 items tonight to consider in terms of zoning ordinance amendments. The first is the gas service station spacing. This was brought forward back in August by a petitioner who asked the Planning Commission to consider revising the existing zoning standards regulating where gasoline self-service stations can be located. So we've brought that back to the Planning Commission this month with some additional maps that can help guide this conversation or support the conversation. And one update from the last time we discussed this is previously we had talked about the request that the applicant brought forward, and that snowballed into talking about alternative fuel stations and how those might play into this. But after talking with Jill a little bit more, we thought we should probably kind of split the issues, even though they're closely related, and first discuss what the applicant brought forward, what's been proposed. So that's the first topic for tonight. And I apologize, the memos for the two are very similar. They're both dated December 19th. The one that I'm looking at, the subject is zoning discussion, gasoline service station spacing. So in that memo, on page 2, there's some questions for discussion that we can talk about, particularly thinking about the potential impacts and considerations that we discussed at another memo, which is, those are outlined on page, it's page 5 of this memo. And then also looking at the maps that were created newly for this memo, where we had where we have the existing ordinance parcels on the first map, which is page 6 of this memo. So you can see where gasoline stations are currently permitted, and then if you scroll to the next page, you can see the sites where gasoline stations could be permitted if this proposal, if the amendment were to, the proposed amendment were to be approved. So I'll pause there and happy to answer questions and open up for discussion, see what the Planning Commission wishes to do with this proposal. But I think the goal here would be to provide Jill, Ava, and I some direction as to whether you would like to move forward with this amendment and what additional information you might need, or if you're going to keep the guidelines as they are, the standards as they are.
Thank you. I'll bring it up to the commission to see if there's any questions that they want answered. Mr. Brokart?
I'm okay for now.
Mr. Rennell?
The reason you use the mile for the mapping is just because that's what the applicant had suggested, and I don't think we've had any discussion about anything else, correct?
Correct, yes. So that is a good point. So the maps reflect your current ordinance language and then what was proposed by the applicant. And of course, there could be infinitely many variations on any changes that are made.
All right, that's it, thank you.
Mr. Carr?
Overall, I didn't have too many issues with it. The only thing that I would, if we did move forward with the language is, and we allowed these type of facilities to be not on a corner of two major thoroughfares, they would definitely have to have some type of a de-acceleration, acceleration lane. And then we should definitely look at the minimum widths of those lots, because what that applicant in particular was trying to do would definitely need at least, 2 entrances, typically for the type of things that they're trying to do. So we should look at the widths of those lots, and then obviously you making sure that those widths will allow for acceleration and de-acceleration lane, because in particular if they're on 23 Mile Road and, like we talked about with the location they were talking about with, 18 wheelers coming in and out of there trying to make a left-hand turn on the 23 Mile Road is going to be challenging. So that's my only comments on it. I'm not against it or for it yet, but if we are going to move forward, I would recommend that we look at the lot widths, the DXLs, multiple entrances, and how that applies, and and then what are the multiple? So I think this one's not as clear cut, right? So the applicant that came in and wants this language, he has a specific purpose, and that's for some huge mega facility that offers all the different type of fueling options for all the different types of vehicles, commercial trucks, everything that's out there, right? So they're thinking big a lot, but we just gotta make sure that what if somebody wants to come in and just build something that has, gas, electric, or propane, and they don't need as big of a lot, but they still want to support like 18-wheelers versus just private vehicles and things of that nature. I just think that's the kind of language we got to look at. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you.
I was just going to add real quick,
Okay.
yeah, if there's any way we could get, what's the record, with regards to the decel lanes and whatnot, what's recommended, what typically would happen for those, so we would have an idea what we could set those lot widths at, if that's the way we went.
I'll make a note that we can bring that information back, yep.
Mr. Jaworski?
Yeah, I don't know where I am on this. I agree with Mr. Carr. My big thing is, we're talking about alternative fuels, but we're gonna rewrite things for gas stations. So I'm just trying to sort through this.
Thank you. Mr. Kowalski?
Yeah, I'm kind of split to a degree. On this particular site, it's near the intersection, but the intersection has quite a lot of flow of traffic. But when I look at it as well, something's going to be built on this site, and there's going to be traffic of some type of flow, so. And as far as having the stations located a mile and not on the corners, that would have to be looked at it on an individual basis, I would think, rather than have it blanket. Because you don't know what would be appropriate for that particular spot. So I'm a little on the fence on this one too.
Mr. Leonard?
Yeah, I pretty much agree with what everybody's said tonight. I'm on the fence. I'm kind of leaning towards, I'm concerned more than optimistic. The big trucks, the increased traffic, I mean, it's always a concern, especially off of 23 Mile Road, but everywhere. And again, we're looking at changing ordinances for one item that came up. I think we needed a little more discussion on it, but I'm not really leaning towards it at this point.
Thank you. Mr. LaBelle?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Honestly, I don't have a problem with the way the ordinance is currently written. MDOT, planning of the township and what have you, that an intersecting road with a major thoroughfare, 23 Mile Road, is thought about, planned with MDOT prior to that road going in. I believe, personally, from a safety aspect, that there should be two entrances into a gas station, one on each street. Just simply because if there is an accident, there's a problem with a fuel container or a truck coming into a site, people have a way to get out of there. And if you have one or two entrances coming off of a main thoroughfare, all they can do is run. How are they going to get out of there with their vehicle? How's a fire truck going to be getting in there if there is a situation? It makes things difficult. So honestly, I believe that, in my opinion, that the way that the current ordinance is written is correct. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I agree with Mr. LaBelle. I think the current ordinance is correct. Jonathan, did you have anything you wanted to add to that, or is this?
I don't really have anything to add. I think it's a good point that there's, really three different, probably even more, but if we're looking at gas stations individually, I mean, there's really three different types you have. You have your normal, like a BP, then you have your sheets that's a little bit different, and then you have, like a Love's or a Pilot. They're kind of three different things that might have, three different sets of requirements. So it's a little tough to put them all in the same bag. If you're looking at it in the way you're looking at it now, I think that takes some consideration for all three of those. And then to Brian's point about deceleration lanes, especially on 23 Mile Road with the curb cuts we have now, how does that fit in for a site requirement? I mean, it's a lot of things to think about and, what kind of impacts that's going to have on neighboring property. So all very good points that would need to be considered.
Thank you. Any other questions? we'll go on to the next one, or do you have any,
So it sounds like maybe more discussion is of interest, just to make sure I have correct direction. Oh, I'm sorry.
I'll get to you.
Okay, I'm sorry.
I forget the newbie. The other guy was very noisy, you're very quiet.
Well, if you keep ignoring me, I'll get louder, okay? I tend to, I'll entertain any kind of question or thought or request that comes, because we all learn from studying that. However, if it's just a particular request, I think we have to look at it in light of all of what other consequences may come as a result of that, and then also be looking at what do we have potential problems now that could also be remedied by that. So I would not want to change any kind of, amend anything for a single reason without having looked at the entire current requirements. So it's a perhaps.
Thank you. Go ahead.
So I think I'm hearing there's interest in maybe at least one more discussion with some information brought back about lot widths, decel lanes, and maybe some further thought about kind of what Jonathan outlined with the 3 different types of gas stations. I can do some looking and see if other communities kind of provide different standards for different levels of service, sort of idea for gasoline service stations. Anything else I should be looking for or bringing back for you for?
Are we responsible
discussion?
for the acceleration lane and the deceleration, or is that the county?
Please, MDOT.
Yeah, I mean, MDOT or Department of Roads, I mean, I think there's gonna be some overlap there. I mean, it's gonna be up to MDOT or Department of Roads during their permitting process. But also there's the degree of, safety consideration from the planning commission when they're reviewing a site. So, I mean, they kind of overlap, but ultimately if, MDOT or Department of Roads is or isn't gonna issue a permit based on that, that's up to them.
Thank you. Want to go on to
Stephanie, I have
item-
one thing. If you could look into where the 1 mile distance came from in this proposal. I couldn't find it in. Okay, why is it a mile and not a half a mile? Or a quarter of a mile? Is it tied to NEVI? Is it tied to the alternative fuel corridor? I didn't see it as such, but I'm just curious where that 1 mile came from and why is it a mile instead of anything else?
I looked at this back in August or September. I believe it is from the alternative fuel corridor language, but I can confirm that for you.
And then if it's mandated by the state, I'd like to know that too, please.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, want to go to item number 2? Zoning ordinance amendments discussion.
Yes, so this is part 2, also in a memo dated December 19th. The subject on this one's zoning discussion, gasoline self-service stations. So without spacing, and it's only 5 pages if that helps you find it. So again, previously these 2 topics were combined in one memo. Jill and I thought we would kind of try to tease out the discussion and keep them a little bit more focused. So the focus of this discussion is more on the alternative fuel stations, if the township would like to have some standards around those sorts of fuel stations, where they might be located, what the different requirements might be for them. So this is a more open-ended conversation, or even we're starting from nothing really with this conversation. The other one, we had a proposal in front of us, some example or proposed language. Here we don't have anything other than the example ordinances that we've pulled from other communities to kind of use as starting points. So you'll see a set of discussion questions on page 2 for alternative fuel stations at the very top. So some things we might need to be considering are, how are alternative fuel stations different than traditional gasoline stations? Do we need to think about differences between those stations in terms of the different types of chargers, the fast chargers, the level 3s versus the slow chargers, the level 1s? What other amenities might we want near or at these sites so that people have things to do while they're charging their vehicles? How does safety play into that while people are waiting around for their vehicles to charge? Is there any interest in updating parking space standards? We've seen this happening in a lot of communities where they're maybe not requiring EV spaces or not having a specific use for it necessarily, but they might embed it in their parking standards where they say a certain percentage of the spaces have to be EV capable, which would mean that basically they have everything ready underground to plug in a charger, but it's not in the works yet. But there's a future potential for it without having to dig up the concrete for those connections. Or you could ask that they have EVs installed, a certain percentage of spaces. So that's something to just consider. So I think that's basically all the new stuff. Everything else in here you've seen previously, the example ordinance language from some area communities. So I'll leave it there and turn it over to you for discussion and questions.
Thank you. Any questions from the commission? Mrs. Vosberg?
Thank you. I'm new to this entire process, so my friend over here has got all kinds of things that he's been researching, which thank you very much. One of the things I'm concerned about of the alternative EV in particular, we don't know. I'm thinking we don't know what we don't know yet. It's still, right now, tends to be new vehicles that pull into wherever they need to charge, whatever. And I'm wondering if there's anything that we need to be considering for the future. We hear of some of the vehicles that don't work and some of the fire hazards and things that have happened as a result of that. Is that something that we need to look at the fuel station level?
Thank you. Mr. Brokart?
This is really an interesting subject that we're looking at right now. I have concerns because I don't have a comfort level. Which alternative fuel is going to win? Everyone keeps thinking, the electric vehicles are here to stay. Well, maybe they are. Well, then maybe it's nitrogen. Or maybe there are alternative fuels we haven't even thought about yet here in Chesterfield. I'm also concerned that, I'm just going to say it, the federal government put $7.5 billion into new infrastructure for the electric vehicle market here in the U.S., and our new administration may pull the whole plug on that $7.5 billion. $2.5 has been distributed to the states. I don't know how much we got or how it's used, but I've read articles and looked at, Trump is saying, let's spend that money on bridges and current highways and making them stronger. I don't know the direction. So I don't know the direction the country's going, the industry's going, and it's hard for me to wrap my arms around what we should be doing here on the local level. If we do change standards, if we want to be compliant, then let's not be very specific to a technology. Let's be very broad-based. Call alternative energy or an alternative fuel exactly that, alternative. So no matter what the result is, I mean, we're not going to have 10 different powertrains that we're going to have 10 different filling stations. The country's going to wrap its arm around something. And we should be ready for that, whatever it is. So let's keep our eyes and ears open here. Let's not try to make a decision really quickly, but let's understand everything out there. So interesting, kind of fun, but no decisions yet. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brokart. Mr. Renaud?
I'm good on this topic.
Mr. Carr?
Yeah, I mean, my first question to Stephanie was just, alternative fluid fuels. There's several alternative fuels, and this one pretty much just talks about electric. So, I think if we're gonna go down this route, we do need to understand that there's multiple different types of fuels out there, propane, hydrogen, electric, and I'm sure I'm missing something else besides gasoline, but for instance, again, that what sparked all this was that one applicant that wants to have every type of fueling source on one site, and I think it needs to be looked at to understand the hazards and the risks associated with all those different ones, the storage capability, the standoff from adjacent properties. Some of those are under high pressure. So I just think that it's opening a Pandora's box of, again, of what it can be. So I guess my first thing is I don't think this really covers enough of that because it only talks about the EVs. I think it's difficult to mandate EVs because that cost of infrastructure for the applicant, I don't think we have the right, but then again, I don't, know that would, where legal would have to, but I'm not aware of how we can mandate an investor to do that, but maybe we can, and if we can, then I do think that, there's some conversation we can have around that, to maybe, request that, depending on the number of parking spaces, they have one or two of them be EV capable. So I guess that could be a conversation that we could have. But I would say right now, the way that this is I think one, we have to talk about the other alternative fuel sources and how that integrates. And then if we do choose right now, because EV is the big buzzword, I guess the next thing would be how we can implement integrating at least some EV capability within future investments within our township. So that'd be my thoughts.
Thank you. Mr. Jaworski?
Well, I've seen electric charging stations all across Macomb County, and I don't think I've ever seen a line for any of those. So I think we do have some infrastructure already in place. But what I also heard, I'm going to go back to my earlier comment, talking alternative fuel versus changing the verbiage for gas stations. That just doesn't make any sense to me. I'm hearing one applicant is requesting this change, but I'm also hearing a state mandate. So if the state's putting together alternative fuel corridors, I mean, they should have some research that they've invested in and they've put time against, right? Because in the end, we referred to solar before. We can reject solar all day long, but the state can go in and trump our decision. So why should we spend a lot of time doing the research if the state doesn't have anything yet? So that's my point.
Yeah, it's very difficult to write any kind of ordinance or changes if you don't know what the future holds, what's going to come along. We don't know. EV is a lot different from propane, and that's a whole another, until you see the trend moving in one direction, you just don't know. Right now, it looks like EV, but is it going to? I don't know, still more gas than there is anything else. So, that's it.
Thank you. Mr. Leonard?
Again, a lot of good points were brought up, and I agree with pretty much everything. It got me thinking about years ago, I was either on a ZBA at the time, or maybe we dealt with it in planning. This is pertaining to residential, that everybody was talking about putting the little wind turbines on the roof and solar panels and the windmills and everything else, because we had a couple of houses, I think, maybe improperly or unpermitted uses where we saw a couple, and it came up, and we addressed it and height and everything else, and that was probably 10 years ago. And it's still not a big issue with any part of it, whether it's the solar panels or the turbines. Prices have all come down on that stuff, but it really hasn't taken off. And I think we're at the same point with all these different ways to operate, whether it's electric, hydrogen, you know, there's too many choices. And I don't think there's an industry direction, and we're making changes again for maybe one situation against the many years that we've had these in place. I think it's too soon to change anything on the fueling, and it was probably too soon when we had the big discussions about what to do with the solar turbines on the roofs and all that, because it just never really took off. So I'm on the fence, leaning not real positive towards this. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. LaBelle?
You know, I'm on the other side of the fence. I truly do believe that we should put something in writing. We should create ordinance now. You know, as Mr. Burkhardt pointed out, we don't know what the future holds. But in the same token, we can't sit on our hands and wait to see what the future has to say, because we have an opportunity here, just as we do with solar energy, to make sure that we're in the forefront of what's going on. And right now it is, you know, the buzzword is EVs. And we need to have some kind of rules, legislation to govern where and how and when these things are in place, and to make the public safe, you know, to make sure that it's just not a pop-up EV station and there's no place to use a restroom or to get a sandwich or have proper lighting or have places to park. To be safe, to have a blue box, so if there is an issue that arises, and their cell phone is taken or there's something wrong, just so that people are comfortable with Chesterfield Township. And goes back to what Ms. Fosberg said about safety. Do a little bit of research and see how far a lithium battery can be from a fuel tank or a dispensing tank, to make sure that we're not causing a hazard. So I do believe that we should put something in place now, and always remember that our master plan is a living document. At any time, we can change it and adjust our ways. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'm really not sure on this either, because if you look on that EV explosion Trump Tower the other day, they had to have a big blanket to cover it, to put the fire out. You can't put it out with water. You got to use a blanket. And what are we going to make the gas stations require that type of stuff, or is that up to the fire department? So by the time the fire department gets there, the whole gas station will burn down because of all the fuel. So I'm not really sure what I want to do on this either. Mr. Palin?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, I don't know if you all remember, it's been a few years now, but when we did a parking ordinance update, we did include standards for EV charging as an option. It's not a requirement. The ordinance basically says that any use may provide for EV charging stations, and there's standards in there for protection, signage, maintenance, all that is covered, but it's in the parking section as an option. So we do have some language in there, just not as a use itself.
Thank you.
Can I just summarize? All right, so it sounds like maybe at least one more night of discussion on this with some more detail on alternative fuels outside of EVs and standards. Anything else that we could bring to you? Or did I misread the room?
I was gonna, maybe, Mr. Chairman, I don't know, do you want to poll the commission to see, on each one, to see if the commission wants to keep moving forward with the draft, or if we want to prioritize other stuff at this point?
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Sure, we could do that. On item number 1, zoning ordinance amendments discussions, what is up to the commission? Do we want to continue going on with this, or we could just take a vote? This is item A. On item A? Take a vote? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? I'm sorry, what are we voting? All in forward?
To continue,
You want to move forward?
have one more meeting on it? Is that the motion?
Yeah, you want to,
I'll go either way. If we want to discuss it one more time to filter out a few more things, I'm fine with that. If you want to drop it, I'm fine with that too.
so you want to have one more discussion on this, or?
Let's do a vote.
Okay, do vote. Okay, well, let's take a vote.
If
Move
you just want
on
to go
or
down the
move
line
on?
and either continue or postpone.
Yeah, continue or postpone. Ms. Fosberg first,
Continue.
Mr. Brokart,
I think we need to postpone it. I think one more meeting isn't going to answer the questions we need. I know that parking is a big deal. One of the basic questions is how long will it take you to recharge your battery? If it's 10 minutes, you might need 50 spaces. If it's an hour,
This is on fuel stations.
Fuel station.
I'm sorry for the confusion here.
This is item A.
item
One
A.
more is okay with me. I think you know where I'm going on the next one.
Yeah, continue one more.
Mr. Carr? Continue. I'll continue. Mr. LaBelle?
Postpone, stop it here.
Mr. Leonard?
I'm in for one more.
Mr. Klinowski?
Continue.
Mr. Jaworski?
Postpone.
So we're going to continue for one more meeting. On item number B, zoning ordinance amendments discussion, do we want to continue or we want to stop? Ms. Fosberg?
I would like to continue. I don't know that it has to be the next meeting. We've set some, gave questions, information we'd like to see. I don't know if that'll be ready, when that will be ready.
When it's
Whenever
ready, we'll have another meeting. Mr. Brokart?
Postpone.
Mr. Rennell?
I'm all about more information. Continue.
Mr. Carr? Continue. Mr. LaBelle?
Continue.
Mr. Leonard?
Well, we've invested some time into this already, so I don't see the problem with looking at it one more time, and I think I'll have a more permanent decision at that point.
Mr. Klinowski?
Continue.
Mr. Jaworski?
I am going to say interested in learning more about the subject, but postpone a decision.
And I want to continue. Thank you. Now we go to item number C. Ms. Osborne?
Thank you. So the last zoning amendment for discussion here is on building materials. This memo is dated December 26th. So as you know, the township receives plans for new development. We have strict standards here about building materials, but really the ordinance really only calls out brick as an option specifically. And there have been new materials such as hardy board that are now available that are durable, high quality, they're relatively inexpensive, and so they're of interest to developers, but it's not outlined in our ordinance. So every time someone comes with that material, there's discussion and back and forth between the planning commission, developers, and staff about whether or not this would be an allowable material. So we've looked at the master plan. There's not a whole lot of direction there in terms of desired building materials, at least across the entire township. And so what Jill has proposed is updating section 5.4 to creating a list of approved building materials that would be updated and reviewed annually. So this would be similar to what we do for landscaping. Not that we necessarily review and update it annually, but we do have a list of approved and, or I guess prohibited plant materials. And so it's kind of along that same idea. So you'll see in the memo, page 2, at the bottom there starts the proposed list of approved materials. They're things that you've typically approved in the past. And so these would, this list is currently applied to the commercial and office zoned districts, because that's where these standards currently apply. we did wonder if there would be interest in, or I guess first, if these materials would be appropriate in both of those sorts of locations, or if there needs to be a more tailored list to different locations throughout the township to give developers further direction. And then if there's any interest in kind of creating a similar list for building materials for other districts, such as the industrial districts or the mixed-use districts. One thing Jill did want me to note is that she really sees this as just kind of an initial discussion starter. You know, she did provide proposed language, but you know, by no means was she expecting you to say, yes, this is like the way to go. And she would suggest that we have architects and developers and those who are working in these areas come and explain the materials. And I think we've talked about having kind of a show and tell, or like a petting zoo sort of idea of materials. So that could be something we do in the future to help move this along and to provide more information about it. But this is where we are for a starting point. So I'm happy to take comments and questions and hear what you think so far.
Thank you. Commissioner, Ms. Vosberg? Okay. Mr. Brokart?
No questions.
Mr. Renault?
No questions, but want to say I love the idea of the petting zoo concept and actually updating this annually. It's something I've been talking about for a couple of years, so I'm glad we're heading down this road.
Mr. Carr?
Yes, I have a few. So I'm on the fence. The reason why I'm on the fence is I like the idea of expanding it, but then I was thinking I kind of like how it is right now, because now if they want a variance, it goes in front of us anyways, and then we have the option to approve or not the alternate material, and have the discussions on the quality of that material to make sure that it's the proper fit before we approve that variance anyways, because the variance goes to our level anyways. So I was like, so I'm on the fence with that, because I'm like, I don't know, it kind of works right now, because now we have the best of both. We can protect ourselves for 90% brick if we want to enforce that. And if we're open to alternatives, then we can negotiate the type of the quality of the product that we do approve. So I am on the fence with that, unless I'm misunderstanding. But when I read this, that kind of was, at first I was like, oh, this is a great idea. And then as I thought more about it, I thought it might open a Pandora's box for us, because if you list materials, you have to be very careful. There are several categories of quality within each type of material. There's a Hyundai, there's a Chevy, and there's a Cadillac on a lot of these products. If you're just gonna list a product, right, we already learned this with the hardy boards and stuff, right? There's different mill thicknesses, there's different warranties, there's, you know, again, just different quality levels of each type of these manufactured products. So I guess, again, I'm open to it. I think it's not a bad idea, but if you start listing materials, then we really got to go down the rabbit hole to make sure that we're identifying the proper quality level and the material within that material that we're going to consider. Because if you leave it to the developer, they're going to pick the cheapest, thinnest product that they can. That's just going to warp, deflect, you know, and aesthetically be unpleasing in the near future. So again, we just got to be careful of what box we're opening. And then obviously, you know, if I can get educated on my interpretation of the 90%, because like I said, right now, I actually kind of like how we do it, which is we make them come to us and say, hey, 90% brick, I don't want to do it, but what about this, this, and this? And then we say, nope, don't like that. If you do this, this, and this, it just gives us more flexibility, I think. That's my thoughts.
Thank you. Mr. Jaworski?
Yeah, first off, I mean, looking for the future, I mean, brick is in some cases boring, and, you know, we don't want to be boring all the time. We want to have the ability to bring new ideas to the community, but at the same point, why do we have brick? Because it's strong and it's proven, and there's a reason why we have the ordinance. But I'll be the first to point out, I don't have the experience or knowledge of picking anything when it comes to what materials would be better. So, even with the petting zoo. And I remember back in the 90s and the early 2000s when they came out with some new shingles that were better, and then 5-10 years down the line, everybody was replacing their roof. So,
Thank you, Mr. Klinowski. Mr. Klinowski?
Yeah, I've always been a strong advocate of brick, but I also recognize that there are newer materials that are probably equal, so we need to review that. Brian brought Mr. Carr brought some really good points up, and now he's got me thinking a little bit too, so that's it for me.
Mr. Leonard?
Yeah, I've been around a lot of these building materials, and I've seen them evolve over the years. And I think, I agree with Mr. Carr. I think we do have a better opportunity for controlling where things go, so that there's some organized way of allowing these things to come in. We're seeing a lot more of it now. Just over the last couple of years, this Nichiha product in the different thicknesses, that's something relatively new, because years ago there was just the hardy plank, and it was one thickness, it was brittle, and it was durable, but it was paintable, and they've evolved with that. And I just think some of these products, we're gonna keep seeing them, and I would like to have the show and tell, just to, if it's a manufacturer of some of these products, they can come in and explain exactly what's out there, the warranties, durability. If we're leaning on the applicant, or the petitioner, I don't know if we're gonna get exactly what we are looking for as far as information. Some of the other items, we're probably not gonna see a lot of use, but we see it coming. It's happening more and more often. These plastic panels that they're putting on, there's a lot of products out there. Obviously, brick has always been the best, but, it's just, all the building products do evolve, and I think we have to be in front of it, not chasing it. So I'm all for having some of the stuff, maybe the stuff that we see all the time, have somebody come in and explain it and talk about it, and then the other stuff, maybe don't worry about it. But I'm not a big proponent of changing a bunch of stuff and allowing a bunch of stuff, but I think we need to know a little more than what we know now.
Mr. LaBelle?
I agree with everybody. I guess the thing that I'm looking for the most is consistency. So that when it comes time, when somebody does come in front of us and they present EFS, that we all understand that we don't allow EFS on a building over a large majority of the building. We don't allow them to hang signage on EFS, if they've got EFS all over the building, then how are you gonna hang a sign on it? It's clearly written in our ordinance that you cannot hang a sign on EFS. And we recently approved a building with EFS. I think that if we can have a ordinance written so that we can be consistent and then make a decision off of that, rather than, just leaving it open as it is right now to every applicant, every building. Thank you.
Thank you. My only concern is in single-family residential, that we do require some brick on the front. As one development got started with, some of the houses have just all vinyl siding, and they're not very nice like that. So I would like to see that brick or better on single-family homes too.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I just wanted to add to that a little bit that I agree with Mr. Carr, and there is, it is nice for the planning commission to have, the ability to make some of those decisions. But on the flip side of that, it's a little bit hard, to Rick's point, it's a little bit hard when an applicant's coming in beforehand to say, is this material okay? And a lot of times my answer is maybe. Sometimes it is, depending on the height of the building, depending on how it's installed. And, when you talk about it in the sense of a variance, typically when you're doing a variance, you have standards that are met for that variance. So I think the proper way to address it is to build those standards into the ordinance. So if you have a list of materials that are acceptable, but only if they're installed a certain way, or only if they're a certain thickness, a certain grade, I think that's the way to go about it. And I mean, that's not to say you can't still build in some flexibility to the ordinance, but I think it needs to be clearer than what it is now.
Thank you.
If we did go in that direction, Mr. Chairman, if we did go in that direction, Jonathan, as you said, I think there was a section here about having a yearly review. I think that's a really good idea, to have a yearly look at all of these, materials, because then we can see how they performed in the township too, because we've seen sometimes the materials, they don't work as advertised, so that's the important point.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, but how would we write an ordinance? We would have to build in specifications based on, brick is a generic brick. If we pick and choose what manufacturers we can use their product, we're eliminating one manufacturer from another.
Well, that's why I think it's challenging. That's why I went back to what I said, which was currently they have to come in front of us and ask for a variance. And at our level, we can approve it or not approve it. So to me, you're already protected if we just keep it as is. Again, unless I'm misunderstanding the way it's currently written, but that's what we've been doing since I've been on the board. They come in,
Right.
They say, we would like a variance on, we'd like to go with this metal siding or this hardy board, this Nietzsche board, and that's when we've negotiated the thicknesses to make sure that we got the proper quality that we wanted. So to me, it's like, come in front of us with your elevation, your recommendations, bring your samples in front of us, and then if we all like it, and we're comfortable with it, we say yes. If you go down the rabbit hole, like I was saying, of starting to get into each one of these, that's a big Pandora's box, and then if you don't catch everything, there's gonna be someone eventually catches your loophole because we can only be so thorough. Because there's a lot of different products out there. So, I mean, obviously, Giffords Webster, would have to, do all that legwork. But to me, I kind of don't see why when right now I kind of like the system. That's just my thoughts,
Thank you, Mr. Renault.
Yes, if I could real quick.
Sorry, go ahead.
To Jonathan's point, and Mr. Carr, I get yours as well, I don't think we need to make an exhaustive list, but if we have enough, if we've looked at enough plans and we've approved a particular item enough times, I think it would warrant being on that list if we set the specifications for it. Because to Jonathan's point, he's talking to all these potential customers that are coming in to these developers to potentially build, and for his answer to always be maybe, it's not a real warm and inviting answer when we want people to come in and help develop this township. But I would think at a minimum, we could maybe have a list of, 2 or 3 or 4, with the proposed one on this recommendation where we've added limestone and masonry and things of that nature. I think we give us some options, which still lets us deal with the exceptions as requested. But I think at a minimum, we should at least have a small list other than just the one, especially if it's been proven. That's all.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr.
I
Reiner.
agree with everything that they're saying. I think there's a middle ground that we can probably find. We know what's been coming before us, the Nietzsche, we wanted the thicker product, so we need to find out what thicknesses they have, how do they perform. We could maybe come up with a small list of things we've seen consistently. That's one of them. But still leave it open enough that we can look at everything, but give Mr. Palin an opportunity to help guide an applicant when they first come in. because pay an architect to just draw everything random, willy-nilly, and then maybe, yeah, I agree, it just doesn't sound that we're in the right place with that. So maybe there's somewhere in the middle that we can still maintain some control, but give them a little guidance into what they should be doing or could be doing, but it's not a guarantee, but at least something. So maybe there's 2 or 3 products that we could list them so that they can have the architect integrate these into their plans.
Thank you.
And I think maybe we get a little bit more creative on that draft language that's in there. You know, maybe, you guys have done it before where the lower half of the building is one material, then more flexible, you know, above 8 feet or whatever, so that can be written in there. It just, I think that we open ourselves up by not having, you know, clear standards or clear criteria for a variance. I think that's where we're gonna get in trouble. You know, and the way it would work is if it's an appendix to the ordinance, that these are the list of materials, and then we have, you know, we had the one come in last year where they changed their materials, and they came in and they made their pitch on the Nichiha and how that's installed. And then the commission said, oh, well, now that I understand how it's installed, how it works, we're good with that. So then we can just build that right in. So it's not up in the air for the next time, and we have to go through it again. Now we know this is the acceptable standard. And it just gets put in there in stone so that the applicant developer sees that.
Thank you. So is this something that we want to continue with then, Ms. Vosberg? Yeah. Mr. Brokart, you want to continue?
Yes.
Mr. Renault?
Yep.
Mr. Carr? Yes. Mr. Miller, yes. Mr. LaBelle?
Yes.
Mr. Leonard?
Yes, the petting zoo concept, you know, having somebody professionally come in and talk about these products is better than having an architect or an attorney or somebody from the company, you know, that's proposing this building. I think we need to go to the people that make the product that can answer really specific questions that we have.
Thank you. Mr. Klonowski?
Yes.
Mr. Jaworski?
Yes.
So we are going to continue on that item. We continue to number 10, Planning Commission comments. Ms. Vosberg?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like us to continue in a more holistic manner the issues of EV and how in the township, how vehicles can be stored if they're no longer working, how must they be stored? And then also just learning more about what are the standards out there currently. We've heard some anecdotal things of issues with that. I think we just need, I would like us to be on top of it, again, leading that instead of reacting to something that would be, a bad, awful thing that we weren't expecting and people get hurt. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Brokart?
I'm all set, thank you.
Mr. Renault? I'm good, thanks. Mr. Carr?
Nothing.
Mr. Jaworski? I'm good. Mr. Klonowski? Mr. Leonard? I'm good. Mr. LaBelle?
Well, on our next meeting are we having a meeting on the 21st, you think, Jonathan?
I believe so.
Okay. At our next meeting for the 21st, looking for volunteers for pre-planning, and to state that I will not be here, Mr. Chairman.
So, Mr. Leonard, you will be acting as secretary. So we need 2 other people as pre-planning, Mark Renault and Mr. Klonowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chairman, I too will not be available on the 21st.
You will not?
No, I'll be out of town.
Okay.
I was supposed to be out of town too, but I guess maybe not. I booked my flights yet, but I'm supposed to leave. So I will text you.
Okay. So, with that, I will make a motion to adjourn the meeting at 8:06. We have a motion by Mr. Miller, supported by Mr. Jaworski. All in favor?